Windows down, music turned up. Imagine yourself cruising down the highway headed somewhere that you really want to be. But you are riding blindly, letting your intuition guide you to your destination instead of a GPS. You mindlessly follow the path of the freeway until you meet a fork in the road, and now you are forced to make an important decision, one that could change the trajectory and success of your entire journey. Left or right? The pressure is on. There is zero time to think. The cars behind you are honking and restless. You need to pick a path, and you need to pick one now. Left or right? You chose left. It took you an hour longer to reach your destination than it would have if you had just gone the other way. Let's pause for a moment. Now, this example seems pretty unrealistic, right? In my 16 years of being an attentive passenger, I have never been with or seen a driver in such a state of sheer directionlessness as the one in this example. That is because a good driver almost always knows where they are going, whether because of reliance on that GPS or muscle memory or simply being able to decipher road signs. On the road, we readily use those tools that we have available to prepare ourselves for those important decisions that we will need to make. So then why do we so often find ourselves treating the metaphorical forks in the roads of our lives like a clueless driver would treat a real one? Why are we so often unprepared for even the most significant of decisions? I will be the first to admit I often find myself unready when important choices and events arise, simply because the idea of even planning for them, of even getting started, feels so overwhelming. And I'm sure that this type of anxiety is a reality for many of us. After all, how many times have you refused to sit down and do your homework or procrastinated studying just because the breadth of information that you need to tackle feels so vast? For those of us who relate, we need to learn how to plan and how to do so in a way that feels manageable. We need our own mental GPSs, systems, and maps that can smoothly guide us to our destinations and help us deal with those dilemmas along the way. Even more importantly, we need to know why these systems work, because it is undeniably more difficult to take advantage of tools that we do not understand and therefore do not believe in. So buckle up, because today we are going to learn how to drive. We are going to learn how to navigate those forks in the roads in our lives. When we first step into a car, often the first thing we do is tell our GPS where we need to go. Doing so is the same first step in the planning ahead process. We need to determine our aspirations. Now, doing so is often a lot easier said than done, and sometimes we don't even realize that it requires just as much strategy and attention to successfully determine your aspirations as it does to design the plan itself. Now, one of the biggest flaws in our planning processes is that we start off on the wrong foot. We do not set goals that we genuinely want, but instead what we think we should want. This prevents us from actually going after goals and then following through with them. To combat this, we need to learn how to differentiate between our shoulds and our genuine wants, which requires a lot of introspection and really thinking about your values devoid of influence from your family, your friends, peers, the media. We're going to do a quick exercise right now, and we'll do an abbreviated version of this here, but I recommend doing this a lot more extensively at a later time. First, think about a moment in your life in which you were really happy. Now, think about a time in which you felt really proud. Lastly, reflect on a memory in which you felt fulfilled. Make sure to pick apart each of these moments and think of them in both an educational or occupational sense as well as a personal sense. Now, as we think about each of those memories that you conjured up, what are those common threads that make each of them so distinctive? Was each experience bringing about a sense of calm? Were you surrounded by loved ones? Were you alone? Were you challenging yourself, or were you showing that you were the best at a craft that you know so well? Each of those recurring themes that we see throughout these moments, those are your values. Keep these in mind as you plan ahead so that you're always working towards things that will make you feel whole in the long run. Now, it's worth recognizing that it would be frivolous to solely do the things you want and draining to only do what you should. It's important to have a balance between the two in order to lead a healthy lifestyle. Fortunately, popular psychology theory suggests that we are innately motivated to regard our needs in an order that regards those most fundamental needs as priority, allowing that healthy should-want balance to naturally manifest itself. Psychologist Abraham Maslow was the creator of the hierarchy of needs. He states that we address our needs in the order on this chart, starting with our biological needs like hunger and thirst, and then regarding those least important needs like self-actualization, which just means expanding to your full potential, as last. Now, this is just theory, so we're not always going to naturally follow this chart to a T, but it can be a great tool for measuring our should-want balance, and if you're struggling with that, you can use this chart to help you. For example, by setting a goal to become a lawyer someday. Let's say I would ask myself, will I have the means that I need to get things like food and water through this job? Will I be in an environment in which I'm not only physically safe, but I also feel like I'm this member of a greater community, and I'm working towards my life's bigger purpose? If those lower ranking needs are being met, then this is probably a safe option. But if those higher ranking needs are being met, then this is an excellent option. Let's strive for more of those excellent options. Now, to sum up all of that psychology talk into a simple mnemonic, we want to create SMART goals, which is something you guys may have heard before. A SMART goal is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. According to psychologists at the University of Darmstadt in Germany, over 1,000 times, this goal specificity and difficulty has proven to warrant better task performance, motivation, and productivity. In other words, by making our goals obtainable, we are starting off on that right foot. We are setting ourselves up for success and increasing the likelihood of our follow-through. Now, once we tell our GPS where we want to go, it will determine the most efficient route from wherever you are to where you need to be. Likewise, we might not be able to set plans as quickly or as efficiently as a computer can, but we can try our best to determine the most beneficial courses of action, keeping in mind all of those forks in the roads that we might face along the way. According to Harvard scholars, it is this engaging in the planning process that sets us up for success and helps us to avoid those things that we know so well, like procrastination and a lack of motivation and overestimation of how simply and quickly a task can be done. Now, I'm not here to tell you that planning is important because you know that, but I think that we're often thrown into this planning process without actually understanding how to go about it. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about some tips that you can use to see how to plan in a way that not only keeps you feeling calm, but also keeps you feeling ready. The first tip is for the STEM brains out there. Think of the planning process in this equation. If situation Y arises, then engage in behavior X. If I have homework to do, then I need to write down all the tasks I want to complete in the order in which I plan to complete them. If I have a test in 3 days, I need to start studying now, devoting 30 minutes a day to the content. Essentially, this can be a great way to simply remember what you need to do in a sentence. But it also, your brain will begin to associate things using this formula, essentially. It will start associating that anticipated future moment, your exam, your work that needs to get done, with an action that you are doing that is going to lead you towards success. Tip number 2 is to be specific. Use just as much specificity that you use to designate that goal that you have to devise your plan itself. Of course, having those specific plans will get you to those specific goals, but studies show that having specific plans can free up space in your mind to simultaneously address different aspirations. And this is so important because we are not one-dimensional beings. It is important that we have the capacity to address different goals at the exact same time. This means that instead of writing train for sport in my planner, I need to write down all the drills that I plan on completing and how long I want to devote to each of them. Now, the last tip is to visualize. The process of visualization is making the conscious effort to see oneself at or approaching achievement of a goal. Visualization calls for the use of your reticular activating system, or your RAS, which is responsible for a couple of things in your brain, including your sleep-awake functions and your processing and filtering of all the sensory information around you, excluding smell. Your RAS comes into play when we talk about visualization because it will take your conscious thoughts of the future and send them to your subconscious. It essentially changes that filtering process and changes what your brain decides is important for you to know. And you will start noticing those things that are meant to get you towards your intentions. Now, there are two things that we talk about when we talk about planning and visualization in psychology. One is outcome visualization, which is seeing yourself at or after achievement of your goal. And next is process visualization, which is seeing yourself approaching achievement of a goal. I would argue that for the sake of the planning process, process visualization is the more important of the two. Process visualization can take on a couple different forms, like closing your eyes and just seeing yourself get towards your goal. But it can also be other visual manifestations of your planning process. For example, a flowchart, or a vision board, or simply a checklist. Essentially anything that gives you tangible evidence of your progress and allows you to see yourself inching towards your success is a great way to see yourself get ready to win and then feel like you are ready to win. Now, every driver knows that traffic, accidents, roadblocks, and a million other detour-causing inconveniences constantly plague the roads. It is so important that we face these things and these challenges and deviations from our plans with an open mind and the ability to adapt, because they are inevitable, both on the road and in our lives, and it is up to us to determine how we will approach them. When things go awry, it is so easy for us to merge our personal amplifications and interpretations of an event and what genuinely happened, thus muddling our view of what genuinely took place, and therefore we cannot plan ahead in a practical manner. Now, in these instances, it's crucial that we reality test. Reality testing is a concept introduced by neurologist Sigmund Freud, in which we see our situation for what it genuinely is, rather than what we hope it is or what we worry it could be. By engaging in this process of reality testing, we are allowing ourselves to see our situation from that objective point of view and thus mitigate that fabricated anxiety and stress. To reality test, it's pretty simple in theory, but you have to get past that element of yourself that is telling you to pay attention to those most immediate and rash conclusions and emotions that you feel. To reality test, just try to look at your situation for what it truly is. What did you do? Not what you felt, not what you worry, but what did you do? Now, measure up your reaction against that feeling, those conclusions that you were able to draw. Was your reaction too much, too little, or was it exactly what the situation called for? If you still find yourself struggling with that, try asking a friend or a trusted adult to look at your situation as well, because that clear outside mind can offer a clear outside perspective. Now, it's worth recognizing that reality testing does not need to happen immediately after a huge event has gone wrong. When we lose our ideal situation, we experience a sense of grief, and so it's important to allow ourselves to cope with those emotions just as we would in any other instance of grief. Now, when we reality test, it is important that we do so with an open mind and understand that this is not an attempt to invalidate our emotions, but instead an attempt to see ourselves in a better and more clear light. Now, I'm going to give you all a real-life example of reality testing. I'm going to put my dignity on the line for this one, so I hope it's good. In fall term, I got a really disappointing grade on a chemistry exam, and I started spiraling. I thought that this was a reflection of all of my academic credibility, and this therefore ruined my goals for the class, and therefore ruined my goals for the term, and therefore ruined my goals for the year, and therefore ruined my entire academic high school experience. I obviously know now that that was very out of proportion and that the situation was not that deep, but the fears that I was feeling at the time were so real. I had to reality test and then move forward before I could change anything, because otherwise I would be acting on some fake version of a situation that was just in my head. First, I allowed myself to feel those feelings of frustration and anger at myself, at my teacher, at my grades for about 30 minutes. And then I decided to stop. I said to myself that the genuine ramifications of my actions were that my grade would drop, but that was something that I could bounce back from and learn from. And from there, I decided I'll start going to extra help. I'll start asking more questions. I'll start studying a couple more days in advance, and then I started seeing progress. I felt confident in my space in that classroom, and I felt like I knew what to expect. So now, congratulations, you guys have finished driver's ed. You guys now know how to navigate those important forks in the roads in your life and approach that planning process with confidence. But what are you going to do with all of this information? You have to try it. I have walked away from so many talks like this that had valuable information, but I simply ignored it because who has the time or energy, right? You guys do. Test what works for you and test what doesn't. Now, something else that I should recognize is that it can also feel just as overwhelming, if not even more overwhelming, to think so deeply about the future. If you find yourself feeling inundated by the planning process, make sure to set specific times to work on it, maybe once a week or once a month, once a term. And then outside of that, completely forget about it, so that you are doing this process and getting ready for the future, but not in a way that feels excessive. So let's stop spiraling and start stabilizing. Let's stop being afraid of the road and learn how to steer. Safe driving, guys.